Welcome back to IGN's History of Awesome, a year-by-year breakdown of big events that shape pop culture. In 2010, esports saw a massive resurgence as Blizzard released StarCraft II: Wings of Liberty, Rockstar went to the Wild West with Red Dead Redemption, and Pixar made thousands of grown-ups cry with Toy Story 3. Get those tissues ready because it's time to cry tears of joy all about 2010.
Hi everybody, welcome to History of Awesome. We're back for 2010, a wonderful year. They gave us Mario Galaxy 2, Plants vs. Zombies, Super Meat Boy, StarCraft II, Wings of Liberty, all kinds of other groovy stuff, including Mass Effect 2.
That sounded like you were doing like a monster truck rally.
I'm excited about
Sunday.
That's right, at the Mass Effect 2 capital of Mid-America. And why was Mass Effect 2 awesome? This is a History of Awesome. We talk about wonderful things in pop culture history. What makes Mass Effect 2 stand out?
I think a lot of previous series that we see as trilogies focus more on this one overall conflict, where Mass Effect 2 took a moment and said, hey, let's focus on these characters. And you really dug into these characters, like Tali, because she's the best.
Oh, why is she the best?
She's by far one of the most loyal companions you have. Very few characters will say, hey, you were gone and I missed you. And she says that, and it's just, it's very heartfelt. And
Esme, you told me before the show this is one of your favorite games ever. What is it about?
Yeah, it's I was actually introduced to the Mass Effect series with 2 because it came to PS3 the year after, 2010. And it was just I didn't think I experienced a game that actually like made you care about all these characters. You were this hero. You did feel like there was this conflict coming after you, and that you can, even though the end of the world is coming, you could take your time to explore all these different creatures, find out about the planets, like find out why is Morden as witty and cute as he is, at the same time like finding out about his species.
it's not a sad thing.
Lore, personality, characters worth getting to know, people you actually cared about, great writing. But this is also a sequel that wasn't afraid to deviate from the original.
Right.
A lot of things change in this.
Which I think is important, right? Because so many times in movie sequels and video game sequels, we see either that sort of play it safe approach or try something wildly different diagonally that just doesn't pay off. It's actually like some of the first video game sequels we ever saw. Like if you think about like Castlevania, Zelda.
Yep, Mario 2.
Mario 2. Things that just took a weird shift. And they don't always work out as well as they should. But I think Mass Effect 2 kind of nailed it. It was also like, I'm a huge Star Wars guy.
Yeah.
And it's cool to have a kind of like a really good space epic video game. Because this actually was happening around the same time where we weren't getting a ton of great Star Wars games. It was kind of the dark ages for that, which I think we're finally starting to crawl out of.
Yes,
but,
hooray!
Hooray!
But in the meantime, we had Mass Effect 2 to keep us satiated. Again, a shift. The story remained very important, but the mechanics changed to be more shooter-like. Did you like that change?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah? Well,
Yes.
Why did you prefer it?
And like going back, I actually played 1, 2, and 3 within a month. And 1, just for the time, was fine, but going back and playing it now was almost unbearable to play.
Just because
the mechanics of how the shooter worked and how you were reliant on certain systems.
Right.
Whereas 2 felt a lot more natural and fluid.
Also rewarded you for coming back from Mass Effect 1 by that was
Continuing
really
your
cool.
save, which is amazing, and that's of course a big part of Mass Effect as a series. And puts the stakes higher. Like if you fail at the end of the day with certain people, then they don't come with you. So that's such a big deal.
Yeah, I thought it was always fascinating. And that was one of the earlier times we started seeing stuff like that. Unless you go back and count stuff like, the Oracle of Ages Zelda games or like Banjo-Kazooie or something like that. But usually like you finished the game and it was done.
Yeah.
And they figured that you would trade it in, then you'd buy the sequel. There wasn't really like this sort of like grain that you would carry through for the entire thing, which, I think gave people a lot of fuel to be angry when Mass Effect 3 didn't turn out the way they wanted it to, because they'd been connected to it for so long.
Sure.
Yeah, they were heavily invested.
Yeah.
It was a game that was easy to get invested in.
I really also appreciated for Mass Effect 2 how a lot of the things that you did before the final mission actually mattered. Like if you didn't do the stuff for the ship, your ship might mess up by the time it gets to where it needs to, and you might lose a member, which is something that if you don't realize it and you didn't prepare and you're at that moment, you're like, no, that person was someone that I was like having a relationship with, and now they're gone.
That's important too. In addition to all the other great characterization and decisions that mattered, and a wonderful story, space sex. That's important too. Moving on in a completely opposite direction from SpaceX, we have Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
Also in 2010.
There's some romance in there.
There is some romance.
Buzz Lightyear's in there.
Yeah, Buzz Lightyear.
Buzz Lightyear,
He
but-
might, who knows what he's doing up there.
Well, there's the thing where his wings
Jessie.
pop out in Toy Story 2. But yeah, let's not be nasty about
Just
Pixar
his wings.
films. Yeah.
Let's just move on. So, Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
A movie that when I first saw the previews for it, I was like, I don't want this to happen.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
boy, was I
Yeah,
wrong.
absolutely.
for sure.
Nobody had faith. Like, they had 2, and we're like, okay, great. Now let's stop.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's do 3. Just no.
Yeah, the second
Why
one
would
was
you do
supposed
that?
to be like an adaptation to like DVD, and then they were like, no, we should actually put a time and effort into that one. And they were like, all right, it's played safe for the second one, and then you third one, you're like, no, you gambled already.
Yeah.
Why are you gambling again?
And I think like the interesting thing is that historically, when you look at, and I know Pixar is a separate entity, but when you look at Disney sequels historically, they're usually bad.
Right.
And
Yeah.
usually like direct to DVD, it's like Lion King 1 and 2.5 or whatever they called it. Or there'll be like weird prequel stories about here's Snow White in high school. You're like, I don't need to know all this. So for Toy Story, like you would make the joke hearing about it, like, oh, what is the kid like 20 now? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's dark.
It is.
It's terrifying.
It takes that lesson about growing up full circle. It does go like full in A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
You have to grow up, live with it.
And the first movie came out in 1995, so we definitely, like, if you were a little kid when you saw it, you definitely grew up with
You grew up with
Andy.
That was
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
My mom started crying in theater because I was about to go to college, and I had my little Pikachu. And I was like, I'm keeping that Pikachu. Andy got rid of his. I'm keeping mine.
So let me ask you guys this then. Like, did any of you bring your childhood toys to college?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I brought a
I
couple
still have,
too.
I still have
I
them on my
s-
desk.
I mean, I still have a bunch of like my 90s and 80s Star Wars action figures on my desk. And I don't know if it's like partially because of these movies that personified your toys. I
Yeah.
mean, I know growing up watching Toy Story movies, there was that sort of idea of like shutting off the light and walking out of your room and being like,
I wonder.
are they okay in there?
I wonder. Yeah, you cared about them. I've had that emotion. I've talked to my toys before. I don't think that's too weird, is it?
Well, you'd made it weird. Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to get there. But yeah, so they take their flagship franchise, they make a trilogy out of it. It works out wonderfully and wraps the story up in a emotionally involving way that doesn't come across as cheap. And they find a way to work the claw in to the end, which is my
Right.
all-time
Yep.
favorite
They also
Toy
sort
Story
of
gag.
evoked the end to another awesome Disney movie, Brave Little Toaster, which ends in this like nightmare junkyard sequence where all the appliances are
right.
getting incinerated. Same deal here.
That's
like,
right.
There was palpable fear in the theater. I was tearing up watching the idea of these toys getting burned.
Yeah.
Spoilers. It's been a while.
No, this,
You
and
haven't
this is
seen
kind
it.
of the last vestige of that period where Pixar could do no wrong.
Yes.
They still make wonderful things, and they made some less wonderful things. This was kind of the apex of that period. I do want to ask you just off the cuff quickly, what's your favorite Pixar movie?
Ratatouille.
Ratatouille?
Yeah.
I don't know. I love so many of them. It's hard. I like a lot of their shorts more than some of their feature films. So.
Okay, that's fair.
Wally.
Wally? Me
Wally's
too.
great.
Wally's my favorite as
So
well.
I will say that there's obviously the first 10 minutes of Up, I cried. The ending of Toy Story 3 and the part in Wally where he didn't turn back on
Yeah.
and Eva's just crying.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
Lost
so
it.
sad.
Lost it in the theater.
Yeah.
And it's me. I'm scruffy, and I'm in a theater full of children, and it's like 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday. Not a good look, but you know, it is what it is.
Fortunately, Toy Story 3, despite being completely honest and treating its viewers like they're intelligent people, manages to wrap it up with tears in a happy way.
And
On
now
the
we're
other
getting
hand-
Toy Story 4.
Yeah, find out more in Toy Story 4.
Yeah. On the other hand, we have war, and I've been told that war never changes. But Fallout New Vegas, which is really kind of a weird property.
Right.
Because it's not exactly a sequel to Fallout 3 because it's made by a different studio and it kind of exists in its own weird little place. You know, the Fallout franchise had been dormant for a long time. Fallout 3 revived it from its old PC days, but then a different company produces this very storytelling-oriented, ridiculously buggy, kind of weird alternate universe take on
So,
Fallout.
It's like in 2010 it's the year of caution. We go in with caution. It's like Toy Story 3, I don't know about this. Like, oh, a new Fallout by a different company. But they all worked out so well.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
I like that idea of sort of going in. I think like cautious optimism is probably better than just straight up cynicism.
Okay.
Because it's easy to be like, this is going to be bad, and then when it turns out to be good, you're surprised. But it's kind of better to be like, I don't know, maybe, and then kind of get slightly
Yeah.
rewarded for that.
Yeah.
I like
Little
that.
life mantra for you.
I like that they weren't afraid to go back to the PC games. Instead of just looking at Fallout 3 and saying, what can we take from that works? They went back to the roots of Fallout and said, okay, setting this in the Old West, taking it off the East Coast, going back, out here to the West. Well, Fallout was always kind of a Western on PC. They just went all in on that vibe, made it very RPG element heavy, probably more so even than Bethesda did, made it feel kind of numeric and grindy and weird. And then they had this wonderful storytelling arc that they created. It didn't have those kind of megaton moments like you got from
Right.
Fallout 3, but everything you were doing all the time was just so darn quirky and interesting, and that environment was really, really rich. I don't know if I've ever enjoyed, until the Commonwealth, a Fallout environment as much as I enjoyed New Vegas.
Yeah, I think New Vegas' setting is absolutely my favorite. It's
Yeah.
hard to beat Vegas, and just the way they play with everything is just so silly and fun.
Yeah.
Just a different take.
Which side of that conflict did you end up picking? I'm curious.
None of us want to tell. No, no. We know we're going to be revealing like major character flaws within ourselves just by actually.
Yeah.
seeing it.
Okay.
So no, I never tell.
They refuse to answer.
Yeah.
All right.
I will say though, like I totally agree with you. Like Vegas is such a fantastic setting for that. There's this like when you go to real Las Vegas, there's an area in real Las Vegas called Old Vegas.
Yeah.
That feels very Fallout. Like, have you guys been there? It's
Yeah,
like this-
absolutely. Yeah.
It's weird because it's like this once ritzy turned kind of dilapidated, funky, almost wasteland.
Yeah.
But inhabited by real actual people that still work and serve extremely
That you
cheap
know of.
drinks. That you know of. They could be robots. But no, I think it's fascinating. It's why, like, I mean, even coming out of Fallout 4, a lot of people were like, this is really cool. Still no New Vegas.
Still no New Vegas. And I guess it's the story richness that was it there. And Obsidian's good at storytelling. That's kind of their forte. It always has been. They sometimes have difficulty creating a game that works, but when they do, it's a lot of fun to make.
But
your way
oddly,
through it.
people, that's one of people's favorite things about Fallout games.
Yeah.
Like it's whereas in another game you would be like, oh, this is glitchy. In Fallout, you're like, this is kind of endearing. You know, like it's funny when a Deathclaw gets stuck upside down in the house.
Also, the only post-apocalyptic appearance of the Cabazon dinosaurs I've ever seen in a video game.
Yeah, totally.
That's
I was
awesome.
going to come up with a whole other list, but that'd be ridiculous. Where did you get that stat from?
What, the Cabazon dinosaurs?
Yes.
They're awesome. Big concrete dinosaurs in the desert in New Vegas.
That-
I went and visited those just like a month ago.
You know, I know you're right, but no, only you would be like, there's no other video games with those.
Me and Pee-wee and that kid from the Wizard, they're like, California!
Okay,
All
the
of
wizard
those.
comes close. We're at tangent now.
We are on a tangent.
Go check out those dinosaurs.
Let's check out those dinosaurs. Check out Fallout New Vegas. Also, check out 2010, the birth of the Funko Pop figure. All right, so you walk through this office. We work in kind of a happy, bright, shiny toy land.
Right.
Yeah.
You step out of the studio and into the office where our desks are, and I would hazard that you could count 50 Funko Pop figurines in that room.
You can
easily.
count 40 on one desk.
Okay, whose desk is that?
Eugene's.
We have a
Eugene-
guy who works
Yeah,
here named
yeah.
Eugene Rivers who has dozens of Funko Pops in his desk. Also, our old editor-in-chief here, Hillary Goldstein, had Funko Pops all
I didn't
over
know
his desk.
that.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, we did not have cute little chibi-style vinyl figures on our desk for absolutely every pop culture obsession, niche, and fetish
Yeah.
you could possibly have in the universe. I went to Funko Pop's website getting ready for this. There are 72 pages of figures
Wow.
available right now, and that's full grid square. You know, yeah, it's got to be over 1,000 of them.
Now, Funko Pops are interesting because they fall in that place between sort of higher end desk statues
Yeah.
and cheap toys.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like what, like $12 sometimes,
Yeah,
$10,
they're-
$15?
They're finally a really great entry point
Yeah.
to having a unified look to your toys,
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
but also accessible because they are cheap.
They're cheap.
Yeah.
And they're small. You can
Yeah.
buy a ton of them. They even just launched a new line that's even smaller.
Yeah, I have some
But
of those actually.
yeah, and they're really cool. Like as like a 80s and 90s pop culture sponge, it was like there were certain things like you would just never get toys for, you know, Back to the Future. You would never get toys for like the Goonies or like even like deep cut Star Wars characters. You'd get them, but Funko made it so you could be like, hey, I really want I want a Walter White, but I don't want him killing anyone or doing
Yeah,
anything horrible.
and they find a way to make that wonderful. It's kind of indicative of the
Yeah.
mainstreaming of geek culture into our lives that's occurred over, I don't know, it's been going on since I was born.
The nerds have been winning.
Yeah, the
for
Triumph of
like-
the Nerds, I think, was the
Absolutely.
name of the documentary that first started to document it. It has become a part of everyday life. Underneath this dress shirt, I'm wearing a Star Wars T-shirt,
Yeah.
and I could probably get away with that at the New York Times as well as I could here now. That's what's changed in our lifetimes. These toys kind of embody that.
Yeah, like it's something talking about like the optimism portion.
Yeah.
Like it's not that it was such a big gamble for Funko to actually do this, but they weren't really known for doing anything other than maybe bobbleheads or like
Yeah.
people were just used to bobbleheads. So in 2008, the CEO just took the toys like fake, you know, just prototypes that took it to Comic-Con, and not a lot of people were interested because they're like, this is weird, it's not a bobblehead, what am
Yeah.
I looking at? But enough women and enough Comic-Con goers were like, hey, this actually is really cute. I'd probably buy more of them. And so he took a gamble of like, I'll use my Star Wars, my DC, and my Marvel licenses that I have, do a little bit of them and see how they go. And it just exploded because it's like a collectible, like you said, like they're accessible, and you can just get as many as you want, and they're cheap. And so it just
follow-up anecdote to that. I worked Comic-Con last year in 2015. I was shooting a video on the show floor for IGN, and the Funko booth like pulled this wall down, and this guy announced, the Funko booth is now open, and I almost got trampled. Like thousands of people running. And I think it's like it's kind of fascinating to have a toy that you know, unless you are something is just deviously wrong with your brain, that you will never have all of them. Like Amiibo, you can collect them all. Nendoroids, you can even be like, okay, they've only made a certain amount of these things. You will never have every Funko.
Unless you're the CEO of Funko.
Unless you're the CEO. But you need a warehouse for that.
You need the Funko room.
Yeah.
You need the Funko layer.
Yeah.
As it were. So Funko Pop, cute, bright, adorable. The Social Network, popular movie from 2010. The absolute opposite of
Not
all
cute
of
or
those
bright
things.
or
Not cute,
adorable
not
at
bright. No. Aaron Sorkin, maybe the master of television and movie making dialogue. David Fincher, Mr. Dark Director himself, come together to produce the sort of dialogue-driven movie viewer's dream in The Social Network. And of all things, it's about the beginning of a technological platform and a bunch of spoiled, annoying college students. And
It's not really based on fact because he really didn't care about making it super based on fact. It's more about drama.
About themes. I think it's more about trying to it's drama, it's melodrama. Frankly, you know, we're talking a lot about like a TV and movie renaissance right now. We're in love with melodrama, and a lot of what we're getting is just kind of gritty melodrama. Those things kind of combined. This movie embodies the themes of greed and ambition and selfishness and loss and kind of creepy, stalky
Behind
vibes.
the most social thing in the world.
Exactly.
It's still massively successful in that it can make you feel sympathy for an arrogant billionaire.
Oh, yeah.
You need good writing to do that, you know, and somehow I was able to pull that off.
It's a wonderful movie. You take this, you find yourself just feeling for the guy, and then he'll do something awful, and you're like, but they're like, but I still like you. I want you to be okay. Please learn something. And again,
be better.
Exactly. And this is a character in a movie. I realize this is not the real person, Mark Zuckerberg, but they create a really wonderful conceit in that. They take America's favorite time sink and they show it in very unflattering terms. I mean, this movie kind of makes you feel bad about using Facebook, but
and you post about it on Facebook about how you saw the movie.
Exactly, because it you know, in one sense, we make a lot of jokes about it, but Facebook has changed the world. It is. There's never been anything like it.
It's also kind of weird because you can remember the start of Facebook and seeing it like in a film, and not into like a documentary, but just in this more dramatic way. It feels almost more relatable. Like I remember when my mom was going back to college at the time, and she got an invitation for Baylor's Facebook, and it was just like the weirdest thing. Of remembering how that all happened and kind of like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened, and I can relate to this movie in this really strange way.
Can't wait for that movie about MySpace.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I mean, you joke. That would be incredibly fascinating.
About learning about Tom.
Didn't Justin Timberlake buy MySpace a few years ago? I thought that happened. Speaking of Justin Timberlake, excellent in The Social Network.
That's right.
Yes,
that was good.
Really, really good.
That was a great segue.
Great performances in that movie. Really good, and also kind of a postmodern rags to riches story. That's another neat thing about it, where you're like, normally in the rags to riches story, you're like, yeah, go for it. And here, how did you feel? Like,
well, so I want to piggyback on what Miranda said, because I think it's really fascinating to sort of look back at the way not just tech but interfaces evolve. Like we've actually seen that more and more in the last 20 or 30 years. That's something that like our parents didn't really deal with. Like they had televisions, they had books and stuff like that. Like air conditioners became, you know, were fans. Candles became lamps, stuff like that. But but we're in a place now. Like if you go back and you try to watch, like you watch a movie on your PS3, or you go and use like the old blades on the Xbox 360, you're like, we use this? And looking at old Facebook and seeing what they pitched it as and how it was just like this one page with one guy that had like 4 likes or whatever to what it is now, it's really incredible to watch a platform like that grow. Because sometimes it's like it's been in front of you for so long that you haven't seen it. It's like when your friends come over and they're like, wow, your dog got huge. And you're like, he did? Like, yeah, I see him every day. I guess I didn't.
No, I think that's wonderful. Moving away from America for 3 years overseas and coming back, like it was just like, all these things I'd never seen in my whole life that had been happening around me, and I was just thrown into contrast. I was like, this movie has the same kind of effect. I agree.
It came back to just thousands of Ray-Ban sunglasses spam.
There was also a lot of anger. Everybody real mad when I got home. Anyway, let's forget about that. We're going to talk about fun things. But you know what's angry? Big flesh-eating monsters, like those features on The Walking Dead. Or, if you're going to say it right, you're only minutes away from AMC's The Walking Dead. AMC's constantly reminding you the show is about to come on. Very excited about that. But The Walking Dead premiered in 2010. Holy cow, there was a time this was not a thing.
It's so weird to think when things started, I was like, oh man, really? 2010?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, exactly. It's 6 years ago now. 6 years.
Probably one of the best TV pilots ever made.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you can. The show has gone all over the place quality-wise. Narratively has been like first half of this season was sort of a disaster at times with the way they treated a certain character. But that pilot was just like the scope of that, you know, just incredible. From the sort of intimacy of waking up in the hospital bed to walking into the world and seeing everything the way it's gone down.
Oh, you can see Frank Darabont's fingerprints all over it. Frank Darabont did the first season, kind of created the framework this was built on, and then was promptly fired, leading to a long and glorious tradition of Walking Dead showrunners being, well, anyway, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But did you watch it from the beginning?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. I read the comics a little bit before the show came on, and I was just like, I would like that it doesn't necessarily always follow it per se.
Yeah.
Even though, granted, in the first season, the CDC isn't actually part of it at all, and they alluded to things that the comic actually hasn't alluded to at all. But it was interesting to see like an adaptation that like is trying to be its own thing, while still being as true to the comic, to like pay homage to the fans that like we know you're the ones that are actually coming in first and making sure that we survive, so that way newcomers come in later and still watch the show. So it's like they did an even balance of that, and like you said, like the first episode with like the half zombie just crawling on the floor and just like you're looking at it, it's like they went this far with just showing gruesome, a corpse just like flaying around on TV, even though it is AMC. Like you don't really see that on TV, even as horrible as Breaking Bad could be, or like, you know, anything else like The Wire. Like they don't go as far and gruesome as The Walking Dead.
Well, we never really had sort of like serialized horror on TV. I mean, we had like things that were kind of like, we had stuff like Tales from the Crypt and Twilight Zone at times, right? But they didn't really have like a running narrative aside from like the Crypt Keeper is this disgusting dude that lives in the basement of some HBO studio. But in terms of like telling a story, and then, you know, I think I forget when, but then we got American Horror Story, which was the first season, which was just as successful, I think. And I think it's like very fascinating to follow a zombie story, but by saying right off the bat, like, we're not really going to trace back how this happened. It just happened. Right. Deal with it.
That's the appeal of The Walking Dead. It's like in most of the zombie movies we actually do get a sense of like what is happening with the rest of the world. Why did the zombie outbreak happen?
There's like the laboratory monkey,
right? Exactly.
Guy,
and even though they don't want to call him Walker,
sick.
That's true.
Or there's always like a teenager mucking around in like the science lab connected to a funeral home, which is like.
But here it's just a lot of people thrust into a situation, surrounded by genuine horror. They figured out great ways to work around the commercial breaks to keep the tension between breaks. They were great at that. They cut around in the story a lot. It was one of the earlier successful examples of short season TV working in America. It was that incredible visual effects work. It was visceral.
It's funny you mentioned the commercial break thing, because I remember watching the first few seasons of True Blood. And they would just end every episode with like, character walks in a room, you don't see what they're looking at, you hear a scream, black screen, next week on True Blood. Like,
predictable.
It's like how Marty always says, like, maybe we're the Walking Dead. Like that's actually the appeal of the show. Like you don't, the zombies, the walkers, whatever you want to call them, are definitely like an appeal to the show. But learning how like Shane and Rick have to now live together again, now that he thought that Rick died and he took Lori and was like being the father figure. So, oh wait, no, the husband's still alive. You got to deal with this. Like it's so interesting.
It's like trying to raise a family under a hornet's nest.
It is.
Where you're like, we're trying to talk, and you're like, damn it. And
a very lethal hornet's nest. That's the other part. This is an ensemble cast show, and I think there are 3 characters left alive from the initial season.
Well, they do that kind of amazing thing where they like pick up a few, kill off a few, pick up a few, kill off a few.
And they make it work sometimes, especially in that beginning show. It's a neat experiment in television. Deviating from that for a second and hopping back from a post-apocalyptic wasteland to early American desert, Red Dead Redemption.
Which also has zombies because of Undead Nightmare.
Which also has zombies. Very good segue. That's right. All right. I can't find enough good things to say about this game.
oops.
Somebody
Absolutely. I mean, so we've had a lot of space.
Yeah.
We get so much space, and it's like, wait, what if we do an amazing Western?
Yeah.
And it's very rare when we get that, and now when you think Western, you think Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, exactly. It
pinnacle of
is
it,
the
yeah.
archetype for the video game Western. It's what we want. We're like, where is it? We want more.
It's like you can spend hours just literally on your horse, just like roaming the plains and
Hunting.
picking up plants and hunting, and you're fine because like it's so beautiful.
Yeah, that was my favorite thing. I had a friend who lived in my neighborhood and used to come over to do laundry at my place because my place had laundry, and he would put his laundry in and sit down and play Red Dead and come back, and I'd be like, so did you like beat through a story? Did you do anything? He'd be like, no, I just like murdered 40 owls and like 70 bobcats, and then I traded in all their pelts and got you more bullets and new guns. And I'm like, really?
Well,
Also a
Rockstar
great
kind of
friend.
grabbed
Yeah.
onto something
Yeah.
there. I think they're very, very self-aware of this. GTA games are about that. You know,
Yeah.
they're about making up stories. They're about crazy things happening and then telling your friends about them. And like, what's another setting where that kind of wild epic would work? And they took the framework of the American, the spaghetti Western,
Right.
and just went all in on that. There was so much to do. I wandered around for, I can't remember how long, just playing poker.
Yeah.
Not for a quest, just decided I was going to be the world's greatest Texas Hold'em player. And I would just wander from tavern to tavern playing Hold'em and shooting people in between.
And that was like a real job back then.
Exactly,
Like,
people did that
was
for a
a
living.
real, like a guy that just walked into taverns and shot people and played poker.
Yeah, that was the
It
job.
used to be like a whole life.
I think this might secretly be the best GTA game ever. I don't
I'm
know.
with you, and I think a lot of it comes off of the fact that just like space, we were sort of fatigued on actual modern day real world stuff.
Yeah, it's just like, let's get in a setting that's not high fantasy, that's not space, that's
Yeah.
not now.
And I think like in a lot of ways, it's almost sort of like, it's almost kind of sad that they haven't explored more territories like this.
Yeah.
We got Bully, which was in a school.
Yeah.
And we got like the Lost and the Damned, which was sort of like, it was modern day, but it's focusing on a different perspective, Ballad of Gay Tony, stuff like that. But in terms of just like picking up the needle and dropping it somewhere else in time,
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed does it really well. But Assassin's Creed is always just a little too serious for
Yeah.
me. And I think
Yeah.
Red Dead was just like, okay, we're going on a fun Western frontier adventure.
It's Sergio Leone. You could literally tie somebody up and lay them in the train tracks to
Yeah.
get an achievement for it.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, you know. But then it could be serious one of it. That ending?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
That's so-
stop right now if you don't want to know.
It's heartbroken.
You marry your horse.
But yeah,
That was legal back then.
you find
crazy.
you get Red Dead redeemed, and
Yep.
then you get greased for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and then
well,
And then
there's
your
the
son
spoiler.
goes and gets
and then your son
revenge.
comes
Yeah.
back and gets revenge. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's so
It's
cool.
so beautiful. Like, so many storytellers have hesitations with letting their protagonists fail or lose or some way, and then they're
So
like,
true.
no, we're letting this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like so slow too, because it's like, you know, since all the guns are shooting pretty slow, you're just like slowly your character's walking and just like slowly just continue being pelted, and you're like, I'm suffering with him. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went through the whole plays with you, and now you're just dying before my eyes, and I
Yeah.
can't do anything.
It's
about
kind
it.
of William Money from Unforgiven meets the end of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or the Wild Bunch. Just like, oh, this is wonderful. Great game. Absolutely spectacular game and a pleasure to play.
When's the next one?
A rock
Your
star?
guess is as good as mine.
Make it happen, Rockstar.
And then finally, Adventure Time. Yay. So, okay, we've got lots of yays here. What makes Adventure Time great, guys?
Oh, it's just so splendid and happy.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's obviously a kids show and it's very much aimed at kids, but it's one of the few shows like we've seen on Cartoon Network lately that are welcoming to adults too. Because
Yeah.
there's so much hidden humor, like a lot of early SpongeBob too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Flapjack and all this other like cartoon stuff. Like you definitely can appreciate it as a little kid, and once you get older, like that happened with me with the Powerpuff Girls. I loved it when I was a kid. I got older, I rewatched it, and I'm like, whoa, there's a whole level
like,
of
hey.
other
Totally.
humor to
Yeah.
it that I didn't
Yeah.
realize.
Well,
and
you're
you
like,
get that in
there's
Adventure Time.
a pain to these villains. Like, what's
Yeah.
going on with this? You know, I think the Lego movie is one of the most recent examples of something that's that successful, where you would see it
Right.
in theaters and you would hear laughter coming from the children, and then a second later, the laughter coming from the adults.
and it's not the same thing.
Never at the same time, just completely different jokes. You know.
I love how it can switch from ludicrous to sweet and
Yeah.
back
Yeah,
again
it's
in
really
about
it's
60
like,
seconds.
It makes, like you said, it makes you just feel happy. Like even if something bad is happening, like you know maybe there's just an adventure they went on that didn't go right. You learned like silly lessons. Like I remember Jake the dog at one point was just like, sometimes you fail because that's the only way you get better. Sign a court. I
Yeah.
don't really know. Maybe
Yeah,
you will, but
it's-
you know.
It teaches such great lessons, and it's really intelligent, which is
Yeah.
something you wouldn't expect from this style of storytelling. It's
Yeah.
just like funny and goofy and aimed at kids. but that has like all these underlying themes and these stories that it consistently tells, and it takes you a few episodes, and you don't have to necessarily watch them in order.
Yeah, because they're 11 minutes too. Like
Yeah.
they're just real quick.
Yeah, and there's these like sometimes these really standout episodes that have like such heart and meaning to them.
Yeah.
I think
about
you totally nailed it.
stuff.
Like for the longest time, or at least I would say predominantly, Nickelodeon cartoons or Adult Swim cartoons or Cartoon Network cartoons were sort of like they leaned more into slapstick and sort of goofiness, like even like Ren and Stimpy and stuff like that. When it got dark, it was still pretty much like goofy slapstick.
Yeah, it was just an iteration on Tom
Yeah.
and Jerry, a very smart iteration, but
And
it was
Adventure
still
Time
there.
has heart, you know, like that's what really separates it from everything else.
Yeah, it
agree.
explores like what it means to be alone and in love and having crushes,
And
but
friendships
Yeah,
and
and
all
friendship,
that
but in a different kind of serious way. But
And especially strange this is happening in a post-apocalyptic world where magic has come back.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like this children's show set in this like post-nuclear
It's
war
so
future.
dark. Yeah,
And, like,
because
there's-
Finn's the only human left. Everyone
Yeah,
else is like
like-
these magical creatures
Yeah.
and stuff. It's funny that you mentioned Nickelodeon. The creator of this actually did like you mentioned or before we recorded, like a 7-minute short that's really weird, and he showed it to like Fred. How do I remember that studio?
Frederator?
Yeah, Frederator.
Yeah.
And they pitched it to Nickelodeon twice, and they rejected it twice. And so when they took it to Cartoon Network, they're like, this looks like something. And so I'm pretty sure Nickelodeon's now like, what did we do?
Yeah.
Because it became a franchise. You pointed out to me, Brian, before that. I mean, the video games that have come out of this. Its roots are in D&D, and you
Yeah.
can tell, and it
Yep.
makes for great video games.
tons of dungeons.
Yep.
in
Yeah,
these shows.
exactly.
Yeah, we've gotten like top-down Zelda games. I think there's been like Endless Runners and stuff like that. I mean, there's a Game Boy in the show.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
Yeah,
made with
Olivia.
that culture
Yeah.
in mind.
Boy,
So.
yeah, BMO, so cute.
So Adventure Time, pretty darn groovy. 2010, a groovy year full of wonderful things. You know what came after 2010? 2011.
You got to look at a card for that.
Yeah, I did, yes. I'm not good at math. So the things that came in 2011, things like the 3DS, X-Men First Class, Game of Thrones, and that music. There was a time that boom, 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 boom,
Yep.
was not in our head all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for joining us so much for History of Awesome 2010. I'm Jared, that's Brian, that's Miranda, that's Esmeralda. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.